All right, today we're going to be talking about solving two-step equations. And in order to know how to solve a two-step equation, we first need to make sure we know the order of operations. So some people use PEMDAS. I use GEMS. I think it's easier to remember. So it stands for grouping symbols. E is for exponents. M means multiply or divide from left to right. And S is subtract or add from left to right. Now, normally to solve problems, we work from G down to S. We start at grouping symbols and we work all the way down. When we solve equations, we work backwards. So for solving equations, start at S and move upwards. Okay, so let's just take a look at what this would mean for you. So in our first example, we've got 0.4 times x plus 1.2 equals 6. We're going to start at S and work up. So S means subtract or add from left to right. Well, right here, I've got add. And when we solve equations, we do the opposite of what is given. So in this case, instead of adding 1.2, I'm going to subtract 1.2. Since I subtracted it from this side of the equal sign, I have to subtract it from the other side also. Notice we didn't do anything with this x over here. This 0.4x stayed by itself. So this drops back down because we didn't change it. Positive 1.2 minus 1.2 cancels out. 6 minus 1.2 would be 5.8. Okay, that's step one. We're trying to get x by itself, so we're not done quite yet. So now I don't have any more subtracting or adding left. The next letter is M for multiply or divide. Well, right here we've got 0.4 times x. We have to do the opposite, so the opposite of multiply would be divide. So we're going to divide by 0.4. So x, because 0.4 divided by 0.4 is 1, so it goes away, equals 5.8 divided by 0.4 is 14.5, and that would be our answer. So we start at S and work up, and we do the opposite of what they show us. In every single one of these, that's the same process. So let's look at another example. If we've got negative 2/3 x minus 1/2 equals 1/3. Okay, I'm going to start at S and work backwards. So S is for subtract or add. We've got negative 2/3 x minus 1/2. So right there we've got to subtract. We're going to do the opposite, so we're going to add 1/2. Since we did it on this side, we have to go over to this other side of the equal sign and add 1/2. Okay, this didn't change, so it gets to drop down. Negative 2/3 x. Negative 1/2 plus half goes away. Now, I can't add 1/3 and 1/2 without common denominators. So I'm going to get common denominators over here. I think we'll go with 6, so I need to multiply this times 2 and this times 3. So now I have 2 over 6 plus 3 over 6, which would be 5 over 6. So that's what goes here. Okay, I'm still not done yet. I need to get x by itself. And we've got negative 2/3 times x. So the opposite of times would be divide. When we divide by a fraction, we actually multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm just going to flip that fraction upside down and multiply. And I'm going to do it on both sides. So instead of negative 2/3, I'm going to have negative 3/2. Okay, this, when we multiply by the reciprocal, this cancels out, it makes it 1. So x equals 5 times 3 is 15. 6 times 2 is 12. Negative, because we got that negative right here. And then we can simplify it. 12 goes into 15 one time, and there's 3 left over. And if we simplify a little more, 3/12 is the same as 1/4. So each of these will have 2 steps to solving them. There will be like a multiply or divide, and an add or subtract. Okay, let's look at another one of these. If I've got negative 15 equals 3x plus 6. We start at s, subtract or add. Well, I've got plus 6 here, so that's adding. We've got to do the opposite, subtract. So I'm going to subtract 6 on the other side also. This one goes away. I'm left with 3x. Negative 15 minus 6, we're going to add them together. 21, and we keep the negative, equals 3x. We've done s, so now I can work up. Next would be m, multiply and divide. Right here, I've got 3 times x, so the opposite of times would be divide. Negative 21 divided by 3 is negative 7, equals, those cancel out, x. And we're done because x is by itself. Let's try one more like this. I've got 1 and 1/2 x plus 3 and 1/2 equals 14. Anytime we've got mixed numbers like this, we want to make improper fractions. So I'm going to do 1 times 2 plus 1, which gets me 3/2 x, plus 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7 over 2, equals 14. This would be 14 over 1 if we're looking at fractions. Okay, so next we're going to start at s and see if we have any subtracting or adding to do. I've got this plus 7/2 here, so I'm going to subtract 7/2 from both sides of the equation. But 14 over 1 and 7 over 2 do not have common denominators, so let's fix that. If I want this to be in halves, I've got to take this side times 2. So I've got 28 over 2 minus 7 over 2, which leaves us with 21 over 2. So that's what goes here. Positive 7/2 minus 7/2 cancels out. And then this drops straight down. So 3/2 times x. So we don't have any more subtracting or adding. Now we need to multiply or divide. Well, we've got 3/2 x, 3/2 times x right here. And what we need to do is divide by 3/2, but when we divide by a fraction, again, we multiply by the reciprocal. So we're just going to flip this fraction over, 2 over 3, and multiply on both sides. So this one becomes x equals 21 times 2 is 42 over 2 times 3 is 6. And if we simplify that, x equals 7. And that is how we solve two-step equations.